To Real American, thank you so much for trusting us with your time. I do truly appreciate it, folks. Well, around 3:30 in the morning, Eastern Time, Congress certified Joe Biden's win. This after Congress had reconvened following the chaos that took place inside the Capitol. Shortly after the Electoral College votes were certified, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Dan Scavino releasing a statement on behalf of the president. The president saying that he will take part in a peaceful transfer of power. The statement goes as follows: even though I totally disagree with the outcome of the election and the facts bear me out, nevertheless, there will be an orderly transition on January 20th. I have always said we would continue our fight to ensure that only legal votes were counted. While this represents the end of the greatest first term in presidential history, it's only the beginning of our fight to make America great again. Now, it saddened me to say, folks, what started off as a patriotic morning yesterday in Washington, D.C., unfortunately did turn into chaos at the Capitol. This is hundreds of thousands of proud Trump supporters gathered on the ellipse to stand by President Trump as he gave a speech giving them hope to save America. But of course, what the corporate media fails to tell you is that there are many unanswered questions about who all was actually in the front of that crowd that incited folks to break down the doors and windows and rush the Capitol. The aftermath of violence resulted in 68 arrests. 47 included just curfew violations, unlawful entry of the Hill. 26 of those arrests made on the grounds of the Capitol. We now know 4 people died. One was that Air Force veteran from San Diego, California, shot by Capitol Police. The other 3, we're told, were medical emergencies. Now, one of the most upsetting matters about all of this, folks, is the video that I'm about to show you. It has surfaced all over social media. Very concerning. This is one of the videos to the side entrance of the steps of the Hill. And what you're about to see plainly shows officers helping to open the barricades and allowing people to rush up to the Capitol. That's what I see. You take a look and decide for yourself. Now, could that be because our brave law enforcement officers were overwhelmed and they felt they had no choice to open it up? That may be the case. There is going to be an investigation, and we need to demand answers. Unfortunately, when the crowd eventually breached the Capitol building, this led to the death of that San Diego, California resident I was speaking of. Her name, now we know it, Ashley Babbitt. She had served proudly in the United States Air Force for 14 years. I want to show you this next video where you can see what we're told is a senior Capitol police officer pull out his gun and shoot Babbitt. She gets shot through the neck as she was attempting to breach one of the side windows into a secure area of the Capitol building. I want to warn you, the video is graphic in nature, but it happened, it's real, and you need to see it. Such a sad day for our country. To get to the bottom of the chaos on the Hill, earlier today, D.C. Police Chief Robert Conti spoke about his department's effort to try and settle the violence and figure out exactly what happened and to get to the bottom of the ones who actually incited the violence.
MPD assisted U.S. Capitol Police when they requested our assistance. What we did do was restore democracy for all of America and assisted our partners, the U.S. Capitol, and their approximately 2,000 member force by providing a swift response to an escalating situation. MPD members will continue to be responsible for local D.C., but we are willing and capable, as we saw yesterday, of assisting our partners at any moment, pursue those responsible for these shameful and violent acts. You can help by taking a moment to view them.
Now, the big question to me is, how did this happen? Folks knew that the rally was happening. They knew that there was potential for a clash or violence between Antifa folks on the left and Trump supporters. They knew that Trump supporters would be marching from the ellipse down to the Capitol building. So my big question is, how could law enforcement not be prepared for this? Joining me now, senior analyst for strategy for the Center of Security Policy, J. Michael Waller. Mr. Waller, thank you for joining Real America. How are you today, sir?
Doing well, Dan. Thank you.
So we were, of course, like millions of Americans, watching this all unfold live on television yesterday. Your expertise is security. You were there. How does something like this happen? Was it just they felt overwhelmed because the crowd was so large? which when I look at the video, it was a fraction of what the crowd actually was, because there was hundreds of thousands, and it appeared to me several hundred on the steps, and then maybe 50 to 100 got in. So what went wrong?
It was a real breach of every police protocol one can imagine. Now, I consider myself a friend to the Capitol Police. I work around the Capitol a lot. I helped them since the 1983 terrorist bombing of the Senate. So I'm not taking an anti-police perspective at all. But what I saw there was horrific policing on the part of the Capitol Police. First of all, they weren't prepared. It was known long in advance that there was going to be a very large protest of very energetic people who ordinary security standards would have been necessary. And we didn't even see those, let alone the fact that it was for a joint session of Congress that was voting on probably the most contentious issue since, in our lifetimes. And they did not have adequate security for that. Not only that, they had an intelligence failure where they didn't know what groups or individuals to look for. They were not manned properly. They didn't have. I was on the West Front. So I was about 50, 80 feet away from the police line there, and they simply didn't have enough personnel there to handle that situation. They were standing up in the box where Joe Biden's going to be sworn in on the 20th, and literally, they showed poor discipline by firing into the crowd over the heads of anybody in the front who was causing trouble, into the actual crowd, hitting innocent people. One woman was hit in the face with a tear gas canister. That got the crowd, upset. It was a happy, joyful, excited crowd. It wasn't an angry crowd, although they were upset about what Congress was doing, but it was still a hopeful crowd. But this got people riled up like, hey, wait, we're all pro-police here, and here the police are firing at ordinary people. So then there was a danger that the two entryways up to that part of the Capitol, they're bordered on each side by stone walls about 3 feet high, and that was going to create a stampede of people fleeing, and then you'd have dozens, if not more, people getting crushed or suffocated to death by the crowd trying to escape the tear gas. So the police were firing tear gas on the crowd, smoke, and flash grenades for no good reason. They should have been just dealing with the people up front. Then the Capitol Police completely left the area. This was the inaugural platform where Biden and his whole party are going to be brought in. It's a plywood temporary set of platforms. The protesters, some of them went up to the top of it, waved flags, and then went up to the Capitol. But the point is that there was no Capitol Police presence on the West Front at all.
Wow. Okay, so let me back up and get this correct here, because this is a very fragile situation that we have in our country, and I don't want to overstep, overspeak, or say anything that could be misconstrued or incite anyone, because we already see the Democrats and the left-wing mainstream corporate media today now blaming all of this on President Donald J. Trump, which I have a very, very hard time swallowing that pill that they're trying to push down everyone's throat. We remember the images, and we'll try and get them up, this summer when Washington was under siege. And I remember that big iconic wide shot pic that showed fires burning, the Washington Monument right in the middle of it. There were protests everywhere. And they had people all over the Capitol building. Most all of our monuments were guarded with heavily armed Capitol Police. I remember those images. Why weren't they called out when they knew almost 1 million people would be coming there? There was already online chatter of Antifa or BLM both coming to clash with Trump supporters. So wouldn't you protect our most sacred house with as much force as you did from riots over the summer? Or could this have been something that was planned to say, nope, pull back? And I agree with you. You're saying now, because we didn't see those images and know the timeline, you're saying that when they were still peaceful down on the bottom of the steps, that's when Capitol Police fired the tear gas, rubber bullets and stuff, and they were peaceful at that time. That's more or less what kind of enraged them. Then they started going up the steps for the doors. Is that what you're saying, how it went down?
Sort of. There were, pardon me, there were people. First, the average MAGA or Trump protesters were just families and ordinary people.
Right.
There was an organized cadre of people wearing camouflage gear and helmets with GoPro cameras on their helmets.
I saw that.
They went right past us and said they were going to go in and hit the House of Representatives. we didn't know what to think because it just went right by and you're thinking, what did I just see? But they were there. I noticed them from the march to the White House, from the White House to the Capitol building. So that's 16 blocks.
So these
And
folks
they were
were
just
already
there
in the
installed.
original crowd and kind of leading it, and they're the ones that took the lead up. And that was a group of 50, 80, 100? How many do you think were in that group?
I saw maybe 30 or 40.
Okay. And again, these
But they weren't leading the protest. They were just in small groups of 2 or 3 until they walked up to the Capitol, and then later on, at approximately 3 o'clock or so, we weren't looking. They came up in a line, and it looked like they had military discipline, like some had military training. They didn't look like Antifa people. They seemed like they were anti-Pelosi people, and they were going to go in and we had no idea that they would even be able to breach the Capitol, because you've got as was just heard, a 2,000-man force on the Capitol Police side. I didn't see more than 50 Capitol Police on the west front of the Capitol at that time.
Wow. Well, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because there's been a lot of online chatter about, did Antifa infiltrate? Were these like some crazy right-wing extremists, like some of the guys that were planning the plot to kidnap Michigan governor? Because there are some of those fringe right-wing radicals, just like there's plenty of radical left-wing as well. And what I'm trying to get to the bottom of is, because right now, everyone on the left and the media, and now even some rhino Republicans, are clumping everybody together, saying it was all Donald J. Trump supporters. And I don't buy that. I think these were some fringe folks, could have been from the left and the right fringe, that wanted to do damage, wanted to make a statement, and maybe wanted to give a bad rap to the peaceful protesters as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dan. It seems to be people from the left and the right, but in different groups operating on their own. There were certainly Antifa types there. Some of them were wearing MAGA gear, but they just didn't fit in. They didn't have the same demeanor. They weren't happy and upbeat. They looked like they, obviously didn't fit in. So they were there, but there weren't that many of them. Yeah. And they weren't causing trouble where we saw them.
And once those first 20, 30, like you said, with the military type gear on, busted in, I would assume you're looking at and watching the video. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it appears then that most of the regular folks then were like, well, everybody's going in, so you just kind of follow along. And then other average folks who didn't have weapons, who didn't have gear, just went in with their flags, took some selfies, and yes, were being civil disobedient, but they weren't out to wreck things, destroy, or do harm like that first group of 30 to 50 you're talking about.
Right. I was on the opposite side of the Capitol, so they came in on the east side, which faces away from the city toward the Supreme Court. I was on the west side, which faces the White House. So I didn't see that part of it, but I know from that part of the crowd, once the police left, people just walked through because it seemed like an invitation to go in, or people were curious.
That's what I saw in the video. There was no cops on there walking. There's even video of some of the officers taking pictures and selfies with some of the MAGA folks with their flags that are all calm and peaceful by the rotunda and stuff, like they were hanging out and chatting.
Right, and the police were very relaxed at the time. We noticed this. I even tweeted about it yesterday. I said the police looked very relaxed. In fact, some of the D.C. police and the D.C. National Guard were on Pennsylvania Avenue, were standing around listening to President Trump's speech live by radio or by phone. So everyone seemed very relaxed, even going up to the Capitol, until such time as the small tactical unit came out with the stun guns and paintball guns that fired the pepper rounds.
That's what makes me wonder, Michael, on the video we showed right before we introed you, where you see police actually pull some of those metal barriers and open them and just let them start walking in. Whether they were undermanned, so they were fearful for their lives, I can totally understand that. They said, hey, we don't have enough manpower. Or maybe they were kind of feeling their frustration and saying, come on in. I mean, we're not going to know what through their heads, but the video's there. You can't lie about the video. It's on it. I don't know if you've seen that clip, but you actually see, I don't know what side of the house that was on. Yeah, you're feeling on that.
That was on the east side.
That was on the east side.
Yeah, but they're basically friendly people. They have to work with the public all the time. Sure. And sometimes things get rowdy, but they have a layered defense of the Capitol complex. So if you do break through one barrier, you're supposed to be isolated. And it's a very narrow set of passageways when you go into the Capitol building. It's a 200-year-old building. So there should have been ways to stop this. But where you saw the crowd come in and breach in, you had the militants who had a mission to run. And then you had these yokels who were just out there looking around, looking at the murals and handling everything respectfully. Those weren't rioters. They weren't there to cause trouble. But the entryways to the Capitol were open, and people just wandered in the excitement of the crowd.
Yeah.
And the police were not trained to handle that. That was obvious. It
kind of feels like to me what the left said all summer long with the crazy riots that destroyed neighborhoods, businesses, killed and injured people and cops, because I'm a proud supporter of our law enforcement. I wear the pin all the time, is that it was a few bad apples all summer. But the BLM and Antifa movement was just, right? Remember that? So it sounds like to me we had almost 1 million peaceful folks and a couple bad apples that ruined the day.
I don't think there were more than 100.
All right. Michael Waller, we
Even
appreciate...
Joe Biden said that in his tweet.
Wow. It's a miracle.
He said it was a very small group.
It was. Michael, I appreciate your expertise. Senior Analyst of Strategy for the Center for Security Policy. Michael Waller, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Good to see you, Dan.
The next video I want to show you went viral all over Twitter last night as Trump supporters yelled at folks that Michael and I were just talking about that were trying to break into that door and the glass windows. You hear them actually say they believed they were Antifa, and you will see MAGA supporters with the red hats trying to grab the batons and stop people from breaking in. Watch the video. You heard that. They were booing that the guy was beating on the windows and breaking them. They're booing, screaming Antifa. Then a gentleman with a red hat reaches up, grabs the bat, and they start cheering that they stopped them. Wanted you to see that. Coming up, we're going to speak with another eyewitness from yesterday's rally and protest. You'll want to hear what he has to say. Don't go away. Welcome back to Real America. As we return here, I want to show you more images of what happened at our house yesterday in our nation's capital. Started out as a very peaceful day. Hundreds of thousands of Americans, patriots, descending on our nation's capital to have their voices heard. Why? They were upset. They truly believed this election was rigged, and they wanted to be heard. And then, because of a few, now that day, and possibly this presidency, will have a stain on it forever, which I think is tragic, because the movement and the cause, to me, was just. But the actions by those few, storming the doors of the Capitol, attacking law enforcement, doing destruction, did a massive, massive injustice and disservice to what those millions upon millions of Americans were trying to get across, which was that they want to be represented. They want America to be put first, and they wanted to know they had a free and fair, open election. My next guest was at the Capitol yesterday. We've had him on the show before. Dr. Cordy Williams, the founder of 1776 Forever Free. Cordy, welcome back to the show. How are you, sir?
Thanks for having me, Dan. It's an honor. I'm doing absolutely great, but the Republic's not doing too good right now.
No, it's not. You probably heard my intro there to your interview. I watched it all unfold. We were on the air, obviously, for hours, talking about it, watching it unfold live. I had high hopes at the beginning of the day, like I'm sure you did, that voices would be heard. At the beginning, we're told 140-some members of Congress and at least 13 senators were going to object to at least 5 to 6 of the state's electoral college certifications and see if we get to the bottom of what actually happened in the 2020 election. And then this happened. Tell us where you were throughout the day. Give us a quick rundown. You were at the main stage in the ellipse and then moved down with the crowd, or what?
Yeah, well, I spoke Tuesday night at Freedom Plaza. We woke up early. We were there about 7 a.m. at the main stage, as you mentioned, probably 15 feet from the president. He arrived a little bit late. We ended up getting out of there probably about 1:30. I mean, I would say there were upwards of probably 500,000 to 1 million people. It was just packed all the way. I think it was packed all the way to the Jefferson Memorial. And so when we got out, we were some of the first people to kind of start to leave, if you will. I mean, amongst the crowd, it's hard to say who was there first. But we literally just went back to our hotel to get on some different shoes and kind of regroup for a second. And then we heard about everything that was going down.
So you went back over. And at what point when you got back there, I know I've seen some video you posted, when you got back to the Capitol building and you were close to, I think, the bottom of the steps, the crowd had already breached, or they were trying to breach when you returned?
I think they were in the process. Well, no, actually, they would have breached by that point because we had already gotten a report about Ashley Babbitt being shot. So we'd already gotten that intel. But there was a sea of people. I mean, there had to be 5,000 people. I mean, easy, if not more. Once it gets over a certain number, it's hard to tell. But it was just covered with people along that side of the Capitol.
Cordy, I know you're a Marine and a chiropractor, a doc now. You're from San Diego. Ashley was an Air Force veteran. She gave 14 years to the country. She was from San Diego. Did you know her or any of the folks that went to D.C. with her?
No, I didn't. I'm actually going to get my assistant to check to see if she's, been on our email list or something like that. I've gotten mixed reports about what happened there. And we've gotten a lot of intel to actually show that there were some of these people, and the Washington Times put a great article about it. I'm sure you saw it, about the facial recognition of some of those folks being Antifa, BLM people. Obviously, we would never incite violence or promote it or anything like that. I think what should have happened, people should have gone up there. They should have protested, right? Like peacefully, like we've always done. It kind of sounds like by some video that I've looked at and seen that the barriers were moved. The cops kind of stepped back. And it's just really interesting, Dan, because, we've been in D.C. probably every month. A month ago, we came in with maybe 200 yards of the Capitol, and they wouldn't even let us really even step on the property. But this was just kind of like an open circus. It was almost like it was orchestrated, or it was just interesting.
Courtney,
really interesting.
The guest before you, Mr. Waller, who is a security expert and was there yesterday, actually, when they started to breach. He'd been there all day since the early morning hours, but at the Capitol. He agreed, and he has a background in law enforcement and security, works with Capitol Police, and him and I were discussing the same thing. During the summer riots, when D.C. was up in flames, they had a huge force. They knew that nearly 1 million people would be coming, yet, as you just said, police pulled barriers way back up to the base of the steps, and there's video we showed, I don't know if we can show it again, where you will see there are folks scuffling with the officers up close to these metal barriers, and then I don't know if they say screw it and they're with the protesters so they open them, or they feel like we're going to get overrun anyway so they open them, but you literally see the officers help pull them open with the crowd as they rush through. So there's a lot of unanswered questions here to find out exactly what went down and then who were those bad actors in the front of the group. Mr. Waller had said moments ago that he believes it was only maybe 30 to 50 strong as far as the first initial ones that were trying to break in. Is that kind of your assessment? I mean, it looked like the crowd then just followed in nice and peacefully after, but the ones that were at the top causing the most issue, there's video of folks screaming, they're Antifa, and people in MAGA hats trying to stop them from breaking in.
Well, and I actually interviewed, Dan, 4 or 5 patriots that came to our booth after, and we got the same intel, and they were directly there watching these 30 people, and I have it on video where there's literally Trump supporters, patriots like us, Dan, literally saying, don't break the windows, don't break the windows. What are you doing? And it's the same thing I've seen when we've done these rallies all over the U.S. You can kind of tell, in somebody's eyes that they have a certain look. Like, for example, we had a security team around us. We're walking up to the Capitol, and there's these guys that just look really like it's beyond military-like. They're dressed a certain way. And then our security guy's like, hey, we need to get up ahead, Doc. These guys are carrying knives. I saw 2 knives on them. And so it's interesting. It's really interesting.
Cordy, where do you think we go from here? We have now a president-elect, Joseph Biden. We have a Democrat-controlled Senate and House. But we have 75+ million Americans that are, pardon my French, pissed off and want answers. Final question, just a few seconds left with you. Where do we go from here? What do we do?
Well, it's one of those times, and some of our viewers aren't going to agree with me, but I kind of go with what General Flynn said Tuesday night and what he said before. I think Donald Trump, our beautiful, amazing, hardcore, rock-solid stud of a president, should invoke the Insurrection Act, and we get those. We need those machines, and then there's no ambiguity. Most of your viewers and my followers, there's so much clear evidence about this. I mean, whether you just look at the amount of ballots that were sent out versus voters that there are in these states, that should be end of conversation. So, I hope he'll invoke the Insurrection Act. Otherwise, I think our republic just ended last night.
I hope you're wrong. He has committed now to a peaceful transfer of power. So it appears that yesterday's fight, which senators and congressmen gave up on after the actions of a few, I don't know. I'm really at a loss for words. Cordy Williams, thank you for coming on the show. Stay safe, brother.
God bless you, Dan. Semper Fi.
God bless you. When we come back, looks like the mask police still exist out there. Wait till you see this viral video. Thanks for sticking with us here at Real America. Well, yesterday, I spoke with a conservative activist and producer named Ashley St. Clair. She was actually on a train headed to D.C. for the rally when she noticed a Huffington Post journalist named Sandy Bacham, or Bacham, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. This woman was harassing men on the train for taking their masks off simply for drinking coffee. They have to take it off, right? Here's what even makes it worse. One of them was a disabled veteran. You gotta watch this. Moments later, somehow, the HuffPo contributor saw the video online. She wasn't even tagged, she wasn't doxxed, but she saw the video was posted online. So she jumps up and goes back on the train and gets into Miss St. Clair's face and called her some pretty nasty names. Take a look at this video. Wow. All right, joining me now to discuss this whole ridiculous thing on a train that went down. This is worse than snakes on a plane. Ashley St. Clair, the conservative activist who was just simply riding to D.C. and then watched this all unfold, and then this redheaded psycho. Wow. First of all, I'm a veteran, so what she did to the gentlemen that were just drinking their coffee, disgusting. But then to attack you when you didn't dox her, which is a big move from the left, right? That's the first thing the left loves to do, actually, is dox conservatives. You just put the video online, and then she got in your face.
That's exactly right. I did exactly to her what she was going to do to that poor man simply drinking coffee. And Great Value Kathy Griffin was not happy when she got a taste of her own medicine. And you knew she was going to do this because she was bragging about how she had 70,000 Twitter followers, and she's recording this poor man simply for drinking coffee without a mask, because there's no other way to drink coffee.
And then
so
called you a Nazi B-word? I mean,
I wish they would come up with better insults. You know, I'm getting tired of hearing the same one all the time.
Right. Was that the conductor or a ticket taker or something, the guy that she was cussing at and acting like he was going to hit her? And he's like, come on, give me a break. I mean, this is what liberals do. They act like a victim and make stuff up. All right. Is that what she was doing?
They do.
Who was that?
This was actually that was just another random passenger who at some point was like, maybe you should stop yelling at her. And I called him the Alec Baldwin lookalike. He was actually very cool and very nice, but she wasn't even near this man, and she was trying to say that he was about to punch her and screaming for her companion. But that wasn't the case at all. But these people, that's what they do. They lie and they love to be victims.
Yeah, and you just simply recorded it and put it up because you felt bad for the individuals that were getting chastised by this crazy Karen over their mask. But you didn't know her name. You didn't put her name on, which is doxing. You just put video and said a crazy woman. And obviously somehow she must have seen it because of what you hashtagged or something, caught her eye when she was on Twitter, right?
Yes, she may have seen that I put a train ride or a mask or keywords or something, but I had no idea who this woman was at all. I don't know why she was flattering herself that much, and, you know, she must be an A-list celebrity with the 70K there, but she had this idea in her head that
Most conservatives never do. You didn't resort to name calling. You didn't brag about your nearly 400,000 followers you have on Twitter. You just kept it nice and cool, recorded it for the country to see that these crazy liberals think they are the masked police, and then they can go dox people like a veteran, a disabled veteran who served our country, which disgusts the hell out of me, being a vet, and you took her to task and held her accountable. What was her name again, now that we know it, by the way? Let's dox her on my show. I'm fine with
Sandy Bachman, Great Value Kathy Griffin. I don't know. They all sound the same. But I believe it was Sandy Bachman. Yeah,
B-A-C-H-O-M, Sandy with an I. Look her up on Twitter. She writes for the HuffPo. Say howdy to her, all my real American viewers. Here's what I think is really cool, too, Ashley. You guys were all on the same train going to the rallies in D.C. to support a free and fair election and this president, and you got kind of a nice surprise, and I want to roll this video and then have you tell me about the guys that you met on the train, because the gentlemen that were harassed by Miss Sandy sent you a video. Go ahead and roll it, guys. And we want to thank Ashley St. Clair for that video and for that interview yesterday. Straight ahead on Real America, an investigative journalist with the Tatum Report was on the ground yesterday at our nation's capital. He'll join. Welcome back to Real America, where earlier in the week we had Drew Hernandez, an investigative journalist with the news outlet Tatum Report, on our show. He was on his way to D.C. the day before the rally. He was there yesterday. He now joins me to discuss exactly what he saw. Welcome back to the program, Drew. Tell me where you were when they started to storm the Capitol, because it appeared to me it was peaceful all morning long, and then there was a few bad agitators at the front of the crowd that did most of the damage.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Dan. Absolutely. Individuals on the ground, there were Trump supporters involved that did storm the Capitol. Was Antifa involved? Were there insurrectionists involved? I can't personally prove that right now. I think, like you said earlier on the program, an investigation does need to take place to determine that. But I will say this, Dan, is could this have been avoided? What I mean by that is you have a lot of people, you have a lot of Americans in the United States of America, more than at least 74 million Americans, that believe that this election was fraudulent. Now, it doesn't help when big tech like Twitter and Facebook are censoring anything that is spoken about this election or how it took place in 2020, and especially at the state courts in these swing states that are just throwing every single case out, even though there's video of stuff taking place in Michigan, in Georgia, in Pennsylvania. They violated constitutional election laws in their own states, and there is no day in court to legitimately look into these things. So I can see how people are getting to this point. I can see how it's gotten to this point, and I think it could have been avoided if we could just simply take a look at what happened, take a look at Dominion machines, take a look at the election process, have our day in court. Why, if nothing happened, Dan, why can't you just prove to us that nothing happened? Why do you have to keep making it seem like it has to be hidden and the American people cannot look into their own elections? I think that just causes people to be even more infuriated. And I think that is a disservice to the American people. Because I'll put it this way, man. Like, if your wife has some serious, legitimate evidence on you that you're being shady, talking to other women, and then she asks to look at your phone and you're just like, no, you cannot look at my phone, she's instantly going to tell you, Dan, hey, if you have nothing to hide, why are you hiding your phone? And I think that's how the American people feel about this election right now.
Yeah, I agree. And to your point about big tech, we now know Facebook and Twitter has pretty much banned and pulled down the president's pages until after the inauguration, if they'll even bring them back up. And he had just put out a video calling for peace, telling people to go home. And then they block him and block that video because he mentioned the words fraudulent election in that video. What kind of disservice did that do? The commander-in-chief telling his supporters, go home, be peaceful, and you pull it down. It's like you want to erase history.
I just think trust and transparency is absolutely needed. When you show any kind of moves to violate that, that's just human beings. This isn't even about left and right anymore. I mean, if you make it seem like you're hiding something, you're suppressing freedom of speech of a United States sitting president, I think people are going to question that, and people aren't going to appreciate that, and it's going to cause some people to ask some serious questions when you're taking actions like that.
Well, and to your point a minute ago about how you can see how 74 million folks are upset, and again, we're not, because I know you're not as well, you're not condoning violence and what happened yesterday with those 50, 100 people, whatever, that stormed their way in, because that was wrong. Attacking law enforcement, breaking into our Capitol, wrong, period. But people wanted their voices heard, and all summer long when we saw how many multiple cities destroyed and neighborhoods and people attacked and cops injured and hurt and civilians killed because of BLM and Antifa, what did the left and the mainstream media tell us all the time? I remember good old Fredo, Chris Cuomo from CNN, literally saying, where does it say protests are supposed to be peaceful? And they called those riots all summer long mostly peaceful protests.
They would either say things like that or they would say nothing at all.
Right.
It's interesting how Joe Biden is virtue signaling on Twitter to the American people, just condemning what happened yesterday. But okay, I get that. But how come you won't do it against Black Lives Matter when they riot? Why won't you do it against Antifa? He believes Antifa is an idea, not an organization. And it's ridiculous because they have been rioting virtually all 2020, burning down buildings. People have been killed over Antifa direct actions. Vandalism commit millions of dollars. I think it was close to like $2 billion in insurance.
Excuse me, and remember our now...
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and excuse me, our now Vice President-elect, remember that interview she did a couple of weeks leading up to the election saying that those riots are going to continue, and they will continue, and they should, her words, after Election Day. They were promoting more violence and acts like this from folks in Antifa and BLM. And you have one day, after 4 or 5 years of peaceful MAGA rallies, you have one day were some agitators, and again, like you said, we don't know who was involved in that crowd that did the breaking and the storming in. There looked like some questionable characters in military gear, folks that didn't quite fit the mold of MAGA supporters. Could they be Antifa, or could they be some just fringe, extreme right-wingers or some anti-government folks that aren't MAGA folks? I think it's a little mix of everybody that was there. But the majority of those people were there to peaceful assemble, which is their God-given right. And then some agitators and bad folks did what they did. They've now tarnished the message. But I think we have to keep moving forward with that message, which these 75+ million people want America to be put first. That's it. And they want a free and fair open election.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll get an honest investigation. But under a Biden presidency, with the FBI under his belt, I don't expect anything that comes anywhere nearly that resembles honor or integrity. So, we'll see what happens. But I will say this, Dan, is I think it'll be interesting to see where BLM and Antifa go under a Biden and Harris presidency. Because I will say this, my undercover work with them that I've done behind enemy lines, they hate Biden. Antifa hates Biden. Black Lives Matter hates Biden. He's already ignoring them. I don't know if you guys saw the news stories where Black Lives Matter is already railing against the Biden administration because they're claiming he's ignoring them. And he literally told them that their defund the police narrative is just not going to work for the American people, which is true. But will Black Lives Matter and Antifa continue to riot under a Biden administration? And who are they going to blame at that point? They won't be able to blame Trump anymore.
No, they know he's an old racist globalist. That's why they don't like him.
Yeah.
Point blank. All right. Drew, I'm glad that you're safe. I know that you were there yesterday. We were showing some of your videos that you sent us as we were speaking. Before we wrap up, anything that you saw or you witnessed as you were with that crowd that you want to point out before we say goodbye to you?
Yes, one thing that I will point out and that I would like answers to is I think we have to designate a sequence of events, because when the Capitol was being stormed at the base of the Capitol near the side closest to the Washington Monument, not the Supreme Court side, the individuals that were storming the Capitol, they did push down gates. They were pushing down gates all the way up to the very steps and then eventually made their way up to that.
Welcome back. Time now to get real. And I got to admit, folks, I've been so upset and disgusted at what happened yesterday in our nation's capital that I wasn't even sure what to say tonight, what to write. I, like many of you, so frustrated on how this all went down. And when I say all of this, I mean the entire last 4 years of the Donald Trump presidency. Actually, go back even further, 2015, leading up to yesterday's tragic events. This divide in our nation that boiled over yesterday, I truly believe, was not our president's fault. This anger and movement towards our federal government started long ago. You know why? Because hardworking, God-loving American patriots have felt disenfranchised for years, if not decades. President Trump was just a lightning rod that gave them hope that things could and might change, and that America would be put first. First over foreign countries. First over special interest groups. First over lobbyists. First over political parties. Now add on top of that the past year, which included overreaching unconstitutional lockdown orders that crushed millions of small businesses